Hi, I'm Johnny, and this is Johnny Likes, the show where I talk about movies that I like. Today, I'm going to talk about the biggest money-losing movie of all time. Audiences didn't go to see it, and critics didn't like it. It's a comedy sci-fi adventure with a solid cast. Today, Johnny likes The Adventures of Pluto Nash.
Tell the world.
So Pluto Nash stars Eddie Murphy, Randy Quaid, Mohr, and Rosario Dawson. It was written by Neil Cuthbert, and it was directed by Ron Underwood. The film takes place in the year 2087 on the moon. Nash, played by Murphy, is a club owner and entrepreneur who finds himself on the run from the mob after refusing to sell them his club. Along with the ride for him are Dina Lake, a waitress who works in Pluto's club, who's also an aspiring singer, and Dino, played by Randy Quaid, Nash's manservant. Oh, he's also a robot. His robo-manservant. Neil Cuthbert isn't a bad writer. He wrote Hocus Pocus, which in my mind is like a certified classic. And he also wrote Mystery Men, which I really want to like, but it just doesn't connect with me. This ended his career. He hasn't written any more movies since. I'm not sure if he's a novelist, but this was it. Ron Underwood isn't a bad director. He's responsible for one of the greatest monster movies of all time, Tremors. He also did City Slickers and Mighty Joe Young, which are both decent movies. This pretty much ended his career as a movie director, although he has gone on to do plenty of TV since. All of the performances in this are campy fun. Murphy brings Murphy to the table. He's never been a great actor in my mind, but he does seem to be having fun with the material, and he's always a pleasure to watch. Rosario Dawson happens to be my imaginary Hollywood girlfriend, so I can't really say anything bad about her. Her performance is fine. There's not all that much to it, though. There's not too much to do. Randy Quaid is great as the robot servant Bruno. I find Eddie Murphy to be incredibly likable and very easy to watch. I can understand the reverence that people a little bit older than me have for him, but at the same time, I didn't grow up during his heyday. I saw his best stuff way out of context. I didn't see him live on Saturday night. I saw him taped on Saturday night like 20 years later. Same goes for like Raw and Delirious and Beverly Hills Cop and 48 Hours. All of his biggest and best roles I saw after the fact. The Murphy I grew up with was in stuff more like Dr. Dolittle and The Nutty Professor. Like, these aren't bad films, but they're just kind of okay and just pretty safe and bland. Jim Carrey is a similar case, although kind of in the reverse. You might feel the same way about Jim Carrey that I do about Eddie Murphy. He's entertaining and funny, but you didn't catch him in his prime, so you don't love him. Another thing I've found with Murphy is that overall he doesn't really make great movies. In general, they're okay, with the occasional dip down into bad or the spike up into quite good. But overall, I would say they average out to be like a 3 or a 3.5 out of 5. I can understand people not loving this film. I don't love it, but I do like it. It's nowhere near as bad as reviews would have you believe. If you were born in the early 90s, you could even have some nostalgia for this film. It's got the classic look of the late 90s and early 2000s film. The colors are bright and exciting, not quite neon, but still very loud. There are lots of funky patterns and clothing designs. This is also the era of CGI just coming into its own. It's just beginning to be competent, but it's far from perfect. It's good for backgrounds and textures, but it is not great for anything photorealistic yet. The music here is very radio-friendly pop songs by artists that are now has-beens or never was for the most part. It seemed to me to have been chosen by committee, or at least by non-creative types. It kind of felt like what a 45-year-old guy who's out of touch with pop culture thinks that kids might like. So this film has a creative story that takes elements from film noir from the 1940s and 50s and transplants them to a retro future to try and breathe some new life into old tropes. The hot-wired cars, the lounge singing, the mob, the club owner, it's all straight out of 40s and 50s stuff. It is an interesting juxtaposition that fails mostly because of the tone shift. All these serious elements from what were dramas and thrillers doesn't quite make it into goofy comedy territory here. I found that the elements didn't cross over all that successfully. Not that they couldn't, they just don't here. I've sounded fairly pessimistic here, but there are some actual funny moments in this film. Nothing like laugh out loud hilarious, but some stuff that put a smile on my face, maybe chuckle maybe a little bit. Murphy's French-made robot in his lunar getaway, who can't seem to quite hold on to the duster and bends at the waist.
Bonjour, vous allez bien? Oops.
Oh.
Jay Mohr doing his awful club routine.
Oh, they're moving father's grave to build a sewer. They're moving him regardless of expense. They dug up his remains to...
Really, anytime Randy Quaid does anything, he is by far the standout in this movie.
Hey, Bruno. What are you, 65?
Model 63. Deluxe.
63? Talk about ancient.
Your sister didn't seem to mind.
The body mod app that swaps Murphy and Dawson's heads onto different bodies. That's pretty cute.
Hey, wait a minute now. Oh, now, I think you done found something there. Look at that, honey. Oh, yeah, look at that. Look at me.
All that sort of stuff. It's a little bit amusing. The biggest problem I actually have with the film is just how bland and safe everything is. I understand that they were going for a PG adventure film here. If they'd given it just a little bit more flavor, it could have gone from an okay film to a good film. Maybe if they had let the jokes be just a little bit more raunchy and maybe gotten like a 14A rating. That's a PG-13 for you Americans and like a 15 for you guys in the UK. That would have really benefited it, in my opinion. In the end, it's completely forgettable and harmless fun. The sound of Bruno's voice is probably the most memorable thing about the film to me. That's about all I have to say about this. My biggest point really is that this isn't as bad as people say it is. And in the right mood, it can be a lot of fun. And this is the type of comedy where I don't laugh so much as just exhale slightly out my nose and maybe get a grin on my face. That doesn't mean that I'm not enjoying watching what's going on the screen. And sometimes that's all I want. Like, I would call this movie like a 40% brain movie, as that's about how much attention how much of your brain power you have to give to it in order to kind of follow what's going on and have a good time. I don't always want like an 80 or 90% brain movie. Sometimes I got other stuff to do, like fold laundry or do dishes, and I want to just kind of half watch something. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to find. I'm gonna give this a 2.75 out of 5. It's a pass, and it's not like I can't wholeheartedly recommend this, but I will say that it's forgettable family fun. So other sci-fi comedies that kind of in the same vein, maybe check those out, would be Galaxy Quest. That's a classic. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's a classic. Spaceballs. That's a classic. So what's Eddie Murphy's most underrated film? What are some other sci-fi comedies worth watching? And who is your Hollywood girl or boyfriend? I'm currently in relationships with several actresses that are unaware of my existence or our relationship. Let me know in the comments, and if you could do me a favor and like and subscribe. It is quick, free, and relatively painless. Plus, it really helps me out. Thanks for watching me talk about movies for a little while, and you can tune in next time to see what else Johnny likes.
world.